The hostilities in the Middle East spread to the United Nations yesterday. Israelis are outraged after the UN Secretary General said Israel bears responsibility for the brutal Hamas attacks.
Well, Israel's ambassador to the UN called on the Secretary General to apologize or resign over his inflammatory remarks. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has the story.
The UN took center stage in the Israel-Hamas war on Tuesday, making demands on Hamas while accusing Israel of occupying the Palestinians.
Nothing can justify the deliberate killing, injuring, and kidnapping of civilians or the launching of rockets against civilian targets. All hostages must be treated humanely and released immediately and without conditions. It is important to also recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation.
Israel's permanent representative to the UN, Gilad Erdan, demanded the Secretary General apologize or resign.
Today, we called him to apologize. There's no justification to the existence of this building. This building was established to prevent atrocities. How can the Secretary General, with his words, justify in any way the terrible atrocities that happened to our civilians, innocent civilians?
Palestinian Authority Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki called on the UN to stop what he called the massacres against the Palestinians.
The ongoing massacres being deliberately and systematically and savagely perpetrated by Israel, the occupying power, against the Palestinian civilian population under its illegal occupation must be stopped. The Security Council has a duty to stop them. The international community is obliged under international law to stop them.
We all recognize the right and indeed the imperative of states to defend themselves against terrorism. That's why we must unequivocally condemn Hamas's barbaric terrorist attack against Israel. Babies riddled with bullets, young people hunted down and gunned down with glee, young people beheaded, families burned alive in a final embrace, parents executed in front of their children, children executed in front of their parents.
National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said Hamas clearly started the conflict.
The president has spoken very clearly, and I think very forcefully, on who's to blame here for October 7th. It's Hamas. It's not the Israelis. It's not the innocent Israeli people that were slaughtered going to a music festival. It was Hamas. They planned this thing for many months, maybe even as long as a year. Hamas is to blame.
Israeli Foreign Minister Eli Cohen reminded journalists about the hundreds of Israeli hostages Hamas is still holding.
We are also here to bring the voice of more than 220 people that kidnapped. I have behind part of their family that joined to the UN Council today. We say clearly and loudly, bring them home. They are civilians.
Israelis serving on the front lines say Israel is not against the Palestinians.
Hamas is a terror organization worse than ISIS. The Palestinian people doesn't have nothing to do with it. It's not their blame. It's the Hamas. We're going to destroy Hamas. We're going to kill them all, and then we're going to talk about ceasefire.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, joining us now from Tel Aviv is Ilan Levy. He's the spokesperson for the Israeli government. I find it incredible that the UN Secretary General would make that kind of statement. What has been the reaction in Israel?
Truly, there can be no excuses for making excuses for the crime against humanity that Hamas perpetrated in that October 7th massacre when they brutally murdered 1,400 people, burning families alive, beheading people, torturing and mutilating children in front of their parents, raping girls so badly that it broke their pelvises, according to morgue workers. There can be no excuse. You know, I don't remember anyone calling for a humanitarian ceasefire with Boko Haram after it abducted 270 70 girls. I don't remember anyone calling on the international coalition fighting ISIS to stop 2 weeks into its campaign. And I don't remember anyone saying that the 9/11 attacks happened in a vacuum. These comments are deeply regrettable. Israel is upholding its right. It's exercising its right under international law to defend our people from an act of unprecedented barbarity against Hamas, a jihadist enemy that declared war on us on the morning of the 7th of October. And we expect the whole international community to show the same moral clarity that the United States has shown in firmly condemning these atrocities by Hamas and standing by Israel's side as we defend ourselves from these barbarities.
What can Israel do? There seems to be an incredible double standard. We've heard from now the UN. Before that, it was the EU talking about collective punishment and warning Israel about war crimes. I find it incredible that Hamas is the government of Gaza, and no one seems, on the international stage, no one seems to be saying, this is a war crime. Every leader of Hamas needs to be tried for that. This shouldn't happen. We should completely cut them off. We should make sure there is no more funding. Is there a double standard? And for me, clearly there is. What can Israel do about that?
You're absolutely right. Israel is now exercising its right to defend itself and acting very clearly and responsibly and trying to get civilians out of harm's way so that they won't be harmed as we go after Hamas infrastructure. And many people in the international community seem happy to absolve Hamas, the government of the Gaza Strip, of any responsibility. I'll give you just one example. The UN Refugee Agency claiming that Gaza is running out of fuel, when we know for a fact that Hamas, the government of Gaza, has 500,000 liters of fuel, but they're hogging it. They're hogging it to fuel their own war machine, their own machine of terror and death, instead of sending it to hospital generators. And Hamas needs to be held accountable. It is responsible for the people of Gaza. And the suffering that we're seeing inside Gaza is firmly the responsibility of the jihadist regime that runs that territory, that has subordinated the Gaza Strip to the needs of its war machine to commit atrocities against Israel. And all we can do is remind the world of the atrocities that Hamas perpetrated on October 7th as we continue with our campaign to fight back against the organization that committed these barbarities, to destroy it so that it can never again hurt our people.
Well, why does this ideology have such a hold? I see the marches where Palestinians are saying we are Hamas. I know Hamas was a political force. They were elected back in 2006. Is the ideology so pervasive that they can't? Hamas is clearly oppressive to the Palestinian people, but they don't seem to ever resist it.
I'll tell you what's particularly sickening about the Hamas ideology: when they murdered 1,400 people, injured over 5,000, took more than 220 people hostage. You see with its sympathizers in the West, around the world, including in the US, on university campuses, have been tearing down missing persons posters. People have been putting up posters, drawing attention to the innocent children who've been abducted and held hostage by Hamas. And heartless people are tearing it down because they, I don't know whether to say, want these children to remain in captivity. Let me tell you about one of those children. This is Abigail. She's 3 years old. On the morning of October 7th, Hamas death squads invaded her kibbutz. They brutally murdered her mother, leaving her 2 siblings to hide in a closet for 14 hours next to the body of their dead mother. As their grandfather said, it was just like in the Holocaust when Jewish children had to hide in the attic from the Nazis. Her father, Ro'i, held her in his arms. Hamas brutally murdered him and then abducted this little darling angel, a girl they just made into an orphan, into the Gaza Strip. And for over 2 weeks, she has been held in a tunnel in the Gaza Strip as a hostage of the terror organization that completed a campaign of murder, of rape, of butchering, of beheading, of torture in her village. We're demanding the immediate and unconditional return of all of the hostages, including Abigail, including all 30 children who are being held hostage. And we are sickened by the lack of international sympathy and solidarity from people who have been tearing down missing persons posters, as if suggesting that this darling little angel, this little orphan, somehow had it coming, all for the crime of being Israeli, for the crime of being a 3-year-old Jewish girl.
Are the hostages delaying the ground invasion? Are you hoping that continued negotiations will lead to their release?
We're doing whatever we can to bring those hostages home. We're going to move ahead with the next stage of the ground operation. I'm not going to speculate on when our troops are going to move in, but they will move in accordance with our operational needs. You know, Israel isn't shooting from the hip. It's not going into the Gaza Strip in a campaign of revenge. We have an operational necessity, a strategic necessity to destroy the terror organization that committed the October 7th massacre, and we'll move in at a time of our choosing. And I'll give you one example about what Israel is doing to try to get those hostages out of Gaza. Israel is now offering people in Gaza a financial reward and assurances for their safety and security for them and their families if they come forth with information about the hostages who are being held by Hamas. And, you know, we keep hearing from the world that Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. And so we're hopeful that there are good people inside the Gaza Strip who have information about those hostages and are going to call the secure line that we've told them they can call in order to tell us where those hostages are, because it is simply unforgivable to commit a war crime like that and take 30 children, including this beautiful little girl, to take 220 people into captivity. And we're going to do everything that we can to bring them home.
Are the Israeli people ready for this ground war? I mean, it's going to be incredibly difficult. It's called a three-dimensional war. They can come up from underground. They're at ground level, and they'll be above the troops. So it'll be costly, highly costly in terms of casualties. What's the resolve of Israel right now?
We know that the days ahead are going to be long. They're going to be hard. And this campaign to wipe out Hamas, perhaps it is something Israel should have done before. It's something we haven't done before because of fears about what the casualties would be like. But this is the situation at the moment, that Hamas has left us no choice. And Israeli society really is united now, united around a very strong sense of justice, that we have to wipe out and get rid of the satanic terror organization that perpetrated the October 7th massacre, because we can't go back to 6 o'clock in the morning on the 7th of October. Everyone realizes that. We can't go back to a world in which a satanic terror organization has the ability to massacre so many of our people, is free to do it again, thinks that the international community is going to stop Israel from defending itself. We will not go back to 6 o'clock in the morning on October 7th. And everyone in Israeli society from left and right understands that we have a very difficult job ahead, but Hamas declared war on us. And it's a war that we are going to win, and we have no choice but to win.
Well, I encourage you. We stand with you, and may you be like Joshua. May you be strong and courageous.
And we really appreciate the thoughts and prayers of Israel's friends all around the world in what is our darkest hour. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks for being with us. Well, Israeli troops are gathered in southern Israel, waiting for the green light to go into Gaza. CBN's Chuck Holton is on the ground near the border, where he spoke with IDF soldiers about their mission to destroy Hamas.
Israel has been battling Hamas. Now Israel's military leaders say the time is approaching for a ground invasion to achieve its objectives.
Our job is to dismantle you, and that will happen. Any who associate with you, whether they're Houthi rebels, whether they're in Iraq, whether they're in Iran, your boss is in Iran, all who oppose the God of Israel and decency and human life will be dismantled. And that goes across. So this is a line being drawn in the sand, and beware, because your judgment day has come.
And everyone in Israel is doing what they can to help. Marco Moreno is bringing supplies to frontline troops.
It's not a burden, it's a right for us as Israelis to serve those guys. It takes time. You've been in the military, you know. It takes time to get everything from the storage, supplied. In the end, those are our kids, those are our nephews, those are our neighbors, those are the generation, the future of this country.
Despite the constant aerial barrage, Hamas still manages to fire off dozens of rockets from Gaza each day.
There's a large barrage of rockets coming from Gaza right now. Those puffs of smoke right there behind me are evidence of the Iron Dome system taking down many of those rockets that are headed for populated areas in Ashkelon and further on.
But Iron Dome can't root out Hamas terrorists in Gaza. These soldiers know what they're up against.
Why aren't we done yet? Well, I'd say if they understood the complexity of underground warfare. There's bombs that are underwater. There's things people can't even think of. There's supplies from North Korea, the F-7 rocket launchers from Pyongyang. There's stuff that people haven't begun to understand.
Israel continues to urge civilians in Gaza to evacuate to the south, even as the IDF continues to pound Hamas positions. Israel insists its goals are to dismantle Hamas and rescue over 200 hostages, despite worldwide protests against the campaign.
And we're not going to stop until we will destroy Hamas. Hamas is a terror organization worse than ISIS. The Palestinian people doesn't have nothing to do with it. It's not their blame. It's the Hamas. We're going to destroy Hamas. We're going to kill them all, and then we're going to talk about ceasefire.
Israel contends that eliminating the Hamas threat will ultimately help the Palestinian people, although the complicated operation is likely to take months or even years.
I hear people talking about proportionality and saying, well, how many exactly did they kill? Should we act exactly like them and go and invade a peace festival? Well, there aren't any peace festivals. And go in and kill innocent lives and murder and take hostages? No. What we have to do is focus on the actual true thought, which is fulfill your mission, restore security, dismantle the threat.
Chuck Holton, CBN News, Ashkelon.
For those that argue for proportionality, keep in mind that this is not new. Israel has been having rocket attacks for years, and it's time for this to stop. There's a whole town there. They nicknamed it Rocket Town because of the frequency of attacks from Gaza. Go back to 2006. Go back to Hamas as a political organization standing for election. In their covenant, the founding document, they were founded as an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. They call for the complete eradication of Jews, not just in Israel, but around the world. When you hear the slogan from the river to the sea, what that means is Israel shouldn't exist anymore. This is a terror state because that political movement got elected, and they were put in charge of Gaza by the people of Gaza. A year after they were elected, they canceled all elections and are able now to do anything they want against their own people, which they have done, and they have been brutal. There is a reason. Gaza used to be part of Egypt. There's a reason Gaza isn't part of Egypt anymore. It's because Egypt doesn't want to have anything to do with them. In Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood is illegal, and they don't want to bring back these militants into their control. They want nothing to do with it. That's why their border is sealed, and that's why they're not receiving any refugees. This is the reality on the ground, and I applaud Israel for saying no more. It's time for Hamas to cease to exist.